What's up, card fighters? Surprised you didn't, I? So I'm here to bring you my undefeated local legend, praise the sun, ARKHITE deck. The reason I'm pushing out this content like way faster than I initially intended. Initially, all my ARKHITE content was gonna be at the beginning of next week, but like Outer Orange just posted like ARKHITE content, so I'm just like, bro, I literally just like bodied with this deck at locals. There's no way that this is just a coincidence. This is destiny. So I feel like now I have to like spread the ARKHITE love into the algorithm with my ARKHITE content, because the fact that like we both found like superior versions of the deck that are completely different is like low-key insane to me. Like, she said she had like a few different builds of ARKHITE, but Outer Orange, if like you're listening to this, shout outs to you, and comment down below if you thought about this, because this is actually like a really cool build of the deck. So obviously something that you're gonna see different from my build right off the bat is I'm playing the grade 0, 1, and 2 of the Ava Ride line. The reason I'm doing this, and the reason you could do this if you do this anyway, if you're not playing my build and you want to be like a little bit cheeky and psych out your opponent into thinking you're playing Ava, is I play the grade 1 promo order, research order for Ava, which you can only play it if you have an Ava Vanguard with glitter, but its secondary effect doesn't require you to have an Ava Vanguard. It just requires you to have 4 research orders in the order zone. So while I don't play Obsquides, I could still get the soul and the counter charge for free, which is actually like really helpful in this deck because we don't really run that many counter charges. Like, more often than not, the counter charge doesn't come up, but the soul does. We go through soul in this deck really quick. But let's start off with the research orders. So, like I said, which is very obvious off our ride line, we run the one results henceforth research order, and then we play 4 of the monster research order. I am going to explain it just in case, like, because this deck doesn't see play. This deck does. I have not seen anybody else play this deck except like Orange, but this deck doesn't see play. So I am going to explain it slightly. When you play this research order, you reveal the top 5 cards of your deck. You add up to 1 monster to your hand, and you put up to 1 monster into the drop zone. So, and its secondary effect is you could rest it to put a monster from your drop zone into the order zone. So basically, the bread and butter of this deck is you want to have at least up to 1 copy of every monster in your deck in the order zone, so at any given moment, when you do call a monster, you could use ARKHITE's ability to tuck it to the bottom of your deck and give that monster 10k for the turn. So really want to max out on these. I'm only playing 5. I believe Orange was also playing 5. I feel like 5 is just like the correct number, because you're going to search this out, and then you're going to get ideally you want a hard mulligan so that you do open up with 1 research order. It can either be this or this, because by turn 3, if you open up with 1 research order, you search 2 off the ride line, you have exactly how many research orders you need to fully unlock ARKHITE's abilities and play the game fully. But going on to the rest of the deck, going on to our monsters, we run a really heavy monster count here. Like, I tried to maximize the amount of monsters I play in this deck. Like, this is a very heavy monster count. So 3 copies of Persona Ride. She is a monster, so you can search her off the order. It is very ideal for you to search out or at least hold on to 1 Persona Ride. This deck does require Persona Ride, in my opinion, just to like, you can push without Persona Ride, but like your push turns / your kill turns are just so much better with the Persona Ride, because your Vanguard more often than not is the weakest attack of your turn. But 3 copies of Persona Ride, and then I run, let me put it right here. I run 4 copies of Volcano Monster. Volcano Monster is literally the best monster in your deck. It's your best beater, because it's, if you have 3 or more research orders, it's 18 by itself. If you tuck a copy of it to the bottom, it's 28 by itself. If you Persona Road, it's 38 by itself. Plus, when it's called, it has a CB1 ability to pop a card based on how many researches you have in the order zone. So if you have 3, so minimum is 3. If you have 3, you could pop 3s and below. But if you have 4, you could pop 4s and below in case like you're playing the one Copium Mahar player, Lamau. But you really do want to max out on this guy. This is the bread and butter of your deck. This is ideally the guy you always want to swing with first because you want to put him back into the order zone with with ARKHITE's ability and then call him back out from deck. That is your bread and butter play of this deck. Then we're playing 4 copies of Windstorm Monster. Now Windstorm Monster here, it's a little bit weird because I feel like we don't have enough monsters / we don't turbo through the deck enough to whereas like his on-call ability for putting a monster from our drop zone into our order zone like really comes up too much. It comes up like once in the early game for me sometimes, depending on the composition of my hand and depending on how many of the monster research order we have. But his secondary ability is very clutch. Like that's the best part of this card. I love rushing with this card. Because if you have 2 or more research orders, he gets plus 5k shield. So he's a 10k shield, 10k interceptor, or 10k shield in your hand. He's a really good card to rush with. He's a really good card to counter rush with. Because this deck generally doesn't compose naturally a large hand or compose naturally like a hand with like a good amount of shield. Usually the hand you compose is a hand that's good enough to survive to get to your kill turn. But yeah, I'm maxing out on 4 copies of the Windstorm Monster. Again, another really great monster for this deck. And then I'm playing 4 copies of the Scissors Bar monster. Now, Scissors Bar, more often than not, I didn't use him in the early game like I thought I would to rush. I would rather just rush with the Windstorm monster. But Scissors Bar is actually like really good as your secondary call target from deck for your like very aggressive push turns, because his ability is if you have a order in your order zone, when it attacks, you can Soul Blast 1 to give it 5k until the end of that battle. So under ARKHITE, if you tuck the copy to the bottom of your deck, that's 25 by itself. With Persona Rad, that's 35 by itself. So it's just a secondary beat stick to your Volcano monster. But obviously no one's gonna beat the Volcano monster. Like, that guy's just really good. But 4 copies of that. And then 4 copies. Where can I put this? Let me put this right here. 4 copies of Wavy Loss. Wavy Loss / what I've been calling it is Secretary Monster, because that's literally what it is. Like, ARKHITE created Wavy Loss to be the lab's secretary. So or like secretary / like helper. But 4 copies of Wavy Loss. Wavy Loss is really good in this deck, and what I would caution new players to ARKHITE is more often than not, like I said, your Vanguard's going to be the weakest attack. Establish a Wavy Loss behind your Vanguard so that when you do get 3 research orders, your Vanguard's hitting from minimum 26 or maximum 36 with Persona Ride. So usually, even if I'm rushing in the early game, if I don't have to commit it to a front row rear guard or to a back row rear guard that's not my center column, I always commit it to the center column. But yeah, 4 copies of Wavy Loss. You really do want to max on this. This is like just a really key booster / it can become a beater, which is like you have your Volcano monster, you have your Secretary monster, you have your Scissors Bar. All these become very clutch attackers, and Wavy Loss is just like one of my favorite types of grade 1s, because not only can it become an attacker, but you could slide it back and it's a booster. So 4 copies of that. For our last few monsters, I am playing 3 copies of the Monster PG. Now, the reason that I'm playing 3 copies of the Monster PG is because we are playing 1 Sanctitude. If you don't have copies of Sanctitude, I would recommend just run 4 copies of the Monster PG, which they can clog, and sometimes I would recommend that if you have multiples to discard one and keep that 15 or 10k shield in your hand, because these are not DPGs, these are regular PGs, which is kind of like the downside of this deck is you have a searchable PG, which can become a beater or a booster, 17k booster, not bad. But you do have a searchable PG, but it's not a DPG, it is a regular vanilla PG. But yeah, That's the reason that we're only playing 3 of the Monster PG. And then for my tech slot, this tech slot can be anything. It can literally be anything. But I chose to play 2 Bulbamine. Bulbamine was errata to be a monster, even though I do have the version that says mutant. But he was errata to be monster to help out this deck specifically, because Bushy Road reasons. But 2 Bulbamines just because the soul and the counter charge do help in certain scenarios. Because sometimes, you know how I said volcano monster is the bread and butter? Sometimes you have to use your bread and butter volcano monster to clear your opponent's field of their important units. Like, in the early game, what I would do is, not in the early game, if my opponent rushed me and, like, hard committed to a board, and I know I could just pick off that board, like, pretty easily, even though it would cost me, like, 3 to 4 counterblasts, I'll do it because I know I have the Bulbamine. I know I have the Ava order to countercharge, because minimum for my turns to work, I just need 1 counterblast. Like, the retire off volcano monster is like extra. It's extra. It's a very good extra that you do have. The fact that you can push very hard aggressively and clean up your opponent's board at the same time. Like key interceptors, key boosters. More often than not, what I did was I would clear the boosters and make them either intercept or attack into the interceptors. But yeah, this is the maximum amount of monsters I play in my deck. Like, I try to max out on the amount of monsters I play. I believe I play 24. Let's check that out real quick. So this is 3, that's 6, 10, 14, 18, 20, 24. So I play 24 monsters in the main deck. But getting on to our triggers. Of course, 1 Sanctitude. Really not much to talk about here. It's kind of mandatory since Chronojet is being considered the best deck in the format right now. You do kind of have to play it for that matchup to help you survive that matchup. Considering if you're using it when they stride, it's a free PG and you love that because you don't have free PGs in your deck. But if you're using it to, you do have to also keep it for the jet if they hit you that hard. But for the triggers. For the triggers, I'm playing 4 regular heals. I really don't believe in effect heals this format. I feel like regular heals are just better for me. You could, again, deck building is personal, guys. As you could obviously see, Outer Orange's deck is widely different from mine. Like, Outer Orange's deck is widely different from mine. So, like, deck building is personal. Like, even though, like, the core of what these 2 decks want to do is the same, like, her core is different from my core. Because my core uses the Ava core, and her core of her deck focuses on drawing cards off a wavy loss. And then I play 4 of the effect draws. The reason I'm playing 4 of the effect draws instead of like 3, so I can play like 8 crit, is number 1, the over trigger basically counts as a revamped critical trigger. And then number 2 is, again, this deck doesn't really naturally draw itself. And you're a little bit weak depending on the composition of your hand, depending on how many of the monster research order you have. You're like a little bit weak to board removal if your opponent is able to remove your board. So that's the reason why we are maxing out on the 4 draw triggers. There's actually a guy at my locals, like, shout out, he beats me every time I want to play something spicy. He, like, round 1, he claps me with ARKHITE. And he plays, like, multiple draws, but, like, I felt like the 4 draws were enough for me. You still want to play crits because, obviously, crits win games. 4 of copies of the Into Soul crit. There are lines to where you could use this as a booster, push Into Soul, give the wavy loss behind your Vanguard plus 2k, and now you're swinging for either 28 or 38 if you Persona Road. So there are lines with the Into Soul crit. Again, better to have them and not need them than to need them and not have them. But obviously, if you don't have access to these, just run regular crits. It's not going to come up for like 90% of your games. 3 regular crits, and then 1 of the Brant Gate OT is the best OT in the game. There's no denying that fact. It is literally the best OT in the game right now. This over trigger, like, I'm convinced that Ava players just wall up till they check this over trigger, like, low key. I'm convinced that Ava players just wall up till they check this over trigger. But yeah, that's the deck, guys. Like, honestly, this deck is it can brick. Obviously you can brick on 2 research orders, but like, because you're only playing 5, but like, hard mulligan for it. You can draw off a wavy loss for it. There was actually one game that I drew off of wavy loss and I top decked into the third order I needed, and that's literally what like basically turned my deck on fully to help me win that game. But yeah, guys, I don't think this deck is as weak as I first like dismissed it and gave it credit for. This definitely feels like a really strong deck. And honestly, if you want to take this to Springfest, I'm low-key thinking about taking this to Springfest. Like my friend is like, he knows, he's like, shut up, bro, you're coping. But I'm gonna put this deck a little bit more and test it through the ringer. But honestly, this deck is really not that. It's really not as bad as like firstly anticipated. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for me. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you thought about the video down below. Tell me any videos you want me to maybe possibly cover in the future. And also, I am debating my discussion video Sundays to become discussion video streams. So let me know what you think about that down below. But anyways, guys, later.